I'm Krystal Olivieri, Global Chief Innovation Officer at GroupM, and I'm here to spend a few minutes walking through some of the trends and innovations coming off the CES floor tour this year. Originally, we had planned to be able to experience this together in person, but unfortunately that wasn't able to happen, and we have to do it virtually. However, that feels pretty on trend with some of the innovations and themes we see coming out of CES this year that we'll dive into more in a minute. So I guess maybe it was meant to be. It certainly hasn't dampened our enthusiasm for what we're seeing this year and to be able to bring that experience to you. And we've partnered with Vox Media and The Verge to really be able to dive deep into this area. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my friends at The Verge to introduce themselves and spend a little bit of time setting up some of the big themes we've seen this year.
Thanks for the introduction, Krystal, and it's awesome to be working with GroupM here on this video for CES. I'm going to kick it off with some introductions. My name is Andrew Malzek, and I am the Senior Brand Director here at The Verge, and I am sitting next to my good colleague, Executive Editor Dieter Bohn.
Hello, hello. I am also one of the founding editors of The Verge. We just had our 10-year anniversary.
10 years. Happy birthday to you and the team, Dieter.
Thank you very much. Give me a cake.
It's January 2022, and it's the start of the new year, which means it's CES time. But instead of talking about all of the weird gadgets and fun things that are on the show floor, while those are fun,
we're going to get there.
Let's talk about the bigger trends. Yeah. Let's kick it off with the metaverse.
We have to.
This is the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
It really started becoming a thing in full force over the past few weeks. What is the metaverse? Please give me the
what is
full
metaverse
answer.
Is the $64,000 question. The metaverse is so exciting for a lot of people because it's one of these tech concepts that's sort of hard to define. And whenever you have a tech concept that's hard to define, it seems like that lack of definition creates a lot of opportunity. Mm-hmm. And so when you talk about the metaverse, you're broadly speaking talking about inhabiting an immersive 3D world. And more specifically, you're talking about multiple immersive 3D worlds and being able to jump between them. And so Mark Zuckerberg's grand vision for the metaverse and renaming the company Meta is he wants to build the foundations for an open ecosystem of different immersive worlds that you would be able to jump between.
Actually, I want to read a definition from Meta, how they define what the metaverse is. The metaverse is a set of virtual spaces where you can create, explore with other people who aren't in the same physical space as you.
And so the big question here is, it's not easy to build an immersive 3D world at all, but is it easier to connect them? I actually think it's harder. And so will you actually be able to move from Meta's world to Microsoft's to Roblox to Fortnite?
There's infrastructure and regulation involved, which we know can take a long time to come together.
So Editor-in-Chief Nilay Patel, his favorite question to ask people who talk about the metaverse is, if you're standing in front of the White House and there's a virtual object there, who gets to decide what that virtual object is, and will we all see the same thing in our fragmented political world? Nobody knows the answer to that question. We don't know how to moderate online social networks today when it's just text in boxes. What is that stuff going to look like when we feel like we are bodily inhabiting these worlds? How much more threatening or dangerous, in addition to being fun and exciting, will that be? We don't know the answers to those questions, and we don't know if the government will want to have a say in the answers to those questions.
When it comes to the metaverse, there are still a lot of questions about media and advertising's role within that ecosystem. We know it will fit. How it will fit is something that we're going to be able to create now and over the next few years. However, there's a real responsibility to learn from the mistakes of the past and ensure that the foundational building blocks of responsibility are embedded into this new ecosystem. This is considerations around brand safety, diversity, equity, and inclusion, sustainability, and data ethics. And we're really excited to work in partnership with the industry to help shape that. For advertising to work in this new environment, it needs to be as valuable and seamless as possible for both brands and advertisers.
Some of the other more buzzy words that we're seeing that are connected to the metaverse, but not quite connected, NFTs, crypto, the larger Web3 movement.
Yep.
What does this all mean, and how is this connected to the metaverse, if at all?
Well, it's just as complicated as the metaverse. So you've got cryptocurrencies, currencies built on the blockchain. You've got NFTs, non-fungible tokens, which are scarce digital assets built on the blockchain that you might be able to auction off or trade. And then you have Web3, which is the hazier idea of all of this technology being used to create new decentralized systems that could replace the more centralized big tech stuff that we have right now. So that's the lay of the land. And in theory, the connection to the metaverse is if you want to have your same cool hat from one metaverse to another, you need some way to track that. And a decentralized system like the blockchain seems like a good opportunity to do something like that.
And it feels like in sort of a lot of ways, there's been a rush and people are making money on art, crypto itself across the board. Are we seeing any technology coming out of CES this week that is, supporting that movement right now?
Yeah, actually we are. There's no buzzword that somebody at CES doesn't try and jump on. We've seen digital picture frames from a couple of companies that will display NFTs. But the biggest thing to me is that Samsung has said that it is going to have an NFT marketplace on its television. So you can display NFTs on the television as artwork. You can also see what the prices are, and you might be able to even go and buy your own NFT. Now, all of this is really exciting, but it's also really complicated for a few reasons. One of them is that NFTs are complicated. They're confusing, and it's possible to have your wallet stolen if you don't know what you're doing. And so will a mass market thing like a Samsung TV be a safe place for consumers to go and start playing around with NFTs? It's unclear.
But I think it's really important to point out here from a sustainability perspective, this has huge implications for the planet as it relates to sort of carbon emissions. To buy a lot of this artwork, it's often exchanged with Ethereum, and by some estimates, the carbon footprint of just maintaining Ethereum is the size of Argentina and sort of their output with carbon emissions. What do you have to say about that? I
mean, another estimate was that Bitcoin and crypto in general has undone all of the gains we've gotten from electric vehicles, from electric cars, which is a very, very sobering idea.
Yeah.
The thing to think about with the environment is a bunch of crypto people have said that they're going to solve this problem. There's lots of different ways to build a cryptocurrency. There's proof of work and proof of stake, and there's been a lot of promises that we would create new versions of these cryptocurrencies that don't take up as much electricity to create and to transact, actually. But that leads me to the next thing to know about crypto right now, which is you can't talk about Web3 or crypto without getting in a fight online. For every person that says they're worried about the environmental issues, there are two more that are saying we're going to solve it, stop bickering. And that bickering has gotten really vitriolic. It makes the fights between, iPhone and Android fanboys look like tiddlywinks. It's actually really, really tough out there. So any company that's thinking about getting into some sort of NFT or crypto or Web3 thing needs to be prepared for the backlash that will inevitably come, because there's just a lot of fighting right now.
NFTs and crypto, very messy. It's somewhat difficult to parse out what's exactly happening and where the future is going to go in the next 5 to 10 years. A lot of what's happening today may feel actually quite like a fad to many brands and marketers. However, the cryptocurrency market cap is around $1 trillion, and JP Morgan Chase in November stated that the NFT market cap was around $7 billion. These are huge numbers with real people investing and buying. From a marketer's perspective, it's actually pretty important to be paying attention to what's happening in this space and thinking about this new consumer as an incremental segment in your portfolio. Will what's going on today be the future use of NFTs and crypto? Maybe not. But the utility and functionality that we see will certainly have a place in the technology ecosystem in the future. So we are really excited to stay focused on what blockchain can deliver, to understand and watch how crypto and NFTs evolve, and to make sure we think about ways that we can drive innovation using these technologies in the future.
So let's continue the thread of sustainability and sort of move that conversation to repairability as well. Sure. I think a lot of young people today, it's incredibly important for them that companies are showing up and not just saying the thing. They're actually doing the work to make sure that their carbon footprint is either neutral or actually reducing it across the board. What are we seeing out of CES that's supporting this movement, especially from the bigger companies?
So what's funny is CES is not a great place for talking about sustainability usually. I think the most high-profile thing at the show this year is Samsung has a television remote that is not only solar-powered, but is also powered off of the radio waves coming out of your router. That's not going to make a big impact. I mean, remotes are pretty small.
Right.
But the big trend overall has been a lot of companies have been buying carbon offsets and promising to be carbon neutral. But when it comes to repairability, which relates to sustainability, we've seen a lot of movement in 2021. And some of that might be coming from a little bit of legislative pressure, but a lot of it is just companies doing the right thing. So Apple has announced that they are going to be offering repair kits, repair tools, and manuals for fixing up iPhones, I believe the 12 and the 13. That is a massive shift for this company.
Right.
We've also seen iFixit, which is the little company that has done the most to sort of advocate for this stuff, has worked with Microsoft to create repair kits for Surface devices. So we are actually seeing a lot of changes with regard to repairability for hardware. Now, the second part of this is going to be changes in software, because often when you repair something yourself, it voids your warranty or even locks down the device afterwards. And so we need to see more than just part kits. We need to see manuals, and we need to see software accepting these changes.
So it's kind of a bummer that we didn't see more carbon capture technology coming out of CES this year. This is a massive area, and we know that consumers really care about sustainability and repairability because they care about our planet. Transparently, we were a little disappointed to see that there wasn't more in that space. However, at GroupM, as many of you may know, we have committed to hitting carbon neutrality across the media supply chain by 2030. So we're working on some really interesting product innovations behind the scenes that we can hopefully share next year and maybe even bring to the CES floor.
So one of the biggest industries that we've seen moving into a more sustainable future is the automotive industry,
for sure,
right?
Yeah. I do think 2022 is going to be a put up or shut up year for the auto industry at large. We need to start seeing these things ship in numbers, and we are seeing some evidence of that. Of course, you mentioned Tesla, but the Ford Mach-E is shipped. They just announced they're doubling production of the Ford F-150 Lightning.
That's great.
So we should see a lot more of those, and that's important because Americans tend to buy trucks and SUVs and crossovers, and that space in particular is starting to see more car companies coming in and competing. And so hopefully we'll stop just looking at concept cars and promises that they're going to ship an EV in the next year or two, and we'll actually start seeing wheels on the road.
There's just a huge perception gap right now. I just want to read some numbers to you that are a bit large and sort of shocking. Nearly 53% of consumers think that EVs are just not reliable.
Wow, okay.
Another 64% think they're too expensive. And then an even a larger number, 85%, just don't even believe that charging stations will be an actual practical thing for an EV future.
Right, so I've got good news and bad news for those stats, I think. I think on reliability, that perception should change, and I think it will change. I think a lot of the reliability perception for EVs has been based on Tesla, which has had some build quality issues, misaligned panels, and so on. But as the big established car makers start to come in and start building EVs at volume, I think that'll change. And just fundamentally, an electric vehicle has fewer moving parts than a motor, a gas motor, so it should be more reliable. In terms of price, that's also coming down. I wish it would come down a little bit faster, but you start looking at the sort of like mid-premium tier where you're looking at like the Mach-E and the Model Y and some of the other SUVs that are coming from like Volvo and Hyundai. They're actually relatively comparable to their gas-powered equivalent. So I think we are starting to see that come down. The third thing, though, you mentioned is the charging network, and that is pretty problematic. Tesla's supercharger network is the gold standard, but Electrify America and the other charging networks out there aren't where they need to be. There's a reliability problem, and there's also just, are there enough of them, and are they fast enough?
But what about CES? What are we seeing at CES that's going to maybe show consumers that these companies actually care and are showing up, to your point, in 2022?
Yeah, so both Intel, Mobileye, and Qualcomm have announced some foundational tech for self-driving. Not technically EV, but a lot of people associate those two things together, so that's important. But the big one to me is the Chevy Silverado got announced. That's going to compete with the F-150. And again, Americans like to buy trucks, and so here is a electrified truck, and I think that will help the industry as a whole. in terms of perception and availability of these cars, it's felt really slow for the last few years. I think that this year and in the coming years, instead of it feeling slow, it's actually going to feel really fast.
So we love to see the focus from the automotive industry on electronic vehicles. It's such an important part of sustainability. But for us at GroupM, we're actually really excited about the evolution of the automobile becoming a device. Similar to your cell phone or your laptop, it's really becoming a platform for software. And that unlocks a ton of potential. The implication for marketers and advertising in general, as the evolution of the automobile continues to increase more towards a software-based platform, is pretty profound. And we're excited to continue to explore the opportunities and see the innovations taking place in that space in 2022 and beyond.
So obviously, for the past 20 or so months, many of us have been working from home. We've turned our living rooms, our offices, our bedrooms into sort of small gyms.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
We've
for
had
sure.
Peloton and Tonal, and just a lot of new wearables coming up. What are we seeing at CES?
So CES often has like a health section where there's a lot of claims that you really can't trust. Smartwatches in general, I think that the opportunity is going to be in sports and fitness, not so much just taking the Apple Watch head on, because it is a 100-pound gorilla in the space. I don't know, this is wellness technically. There's a new dog collar that I think is really cool, because it can track your dog with GPS, but it also can do vitals for your pet, like heart rate and activity, without having it be like a full chest thing. It's just a relatively loose-fitting collar, which is kind of new for that space. To me, though, if we're talking about home gyms, I'm actually more interested in talking about the smart home in general.
Okay. Yeah, I think one of the things that we want to talk about here that's probably the biggest innovation in the smart home space is Matter.
Right.
What is Matter? Why does it matter?
It's an opportunity to make puns is what it is.
There you go.
Now, Matter is a new standard where big tech companies are actually working together. Apple, Samsung, Google, Amazon, like you name it. And they are standardizing the way that smart home gadgets will network and the way that they'll talk to your control layer, so you can actually trust that when you go to the store to buy something, it will work with what you have.
But how is this different currently from Apple HomeKit or Google's Nest products?
Right.
What's the difference there?
So the difference there is you think of those as control layers. So the way that you use your smart home isn't going to change that much. You'll still use HomeKit or talk to your smart speaker with Alexa or whatever else. But the setup for that stuff and the way that they network with each other is going to get much, much better and much, much easier. And this is important because the smart home has really hit a ceiling because consumers are just annoyed by how complex all of this plumbing has become. You got to think about hubs and what work with your router and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And with Matter and this new radio standard Thread, all that stuff should get much simpler, and so it'll be much easier for consumers to pick up and adopt these devices.
You know, how important is privacy moving forward, especially with brands, you know, making these bold claims when it comes to your health or just these private spaces at home? It's really important, right?
Yeah. So I've got good news and bad news. When it comes to security, before you get to privacy, with Matter devices, that situation should get a little bit better. Smart home gadgets are famously insecure, but Matter requires over-the-air updates, so we should see some improvements there. In terms of privacy, the story with Matter and wearables is the same. The spec really has nothing to say about it. So if you are concerned about buying a gadget or marketing a gadget that has data, you need to make sure that you are having a privacy policy that people can trust and that you're a brand that people can trust.
In the lead up to CES every year, GroupM runs a panel to understand consumer attitudes towards emerging and evolving technologies. One of the most interesting insights that we received from our survey this year is actually that consumers are less interested in technology for smart homes than they had previously been in the past. This is largely because of the complexity and the lack of interoperability that smart home technologies have historically had. Innovations like the Matter framework are really important because that can unlock for the industry and reinvigorate the interest in smart homes and in these personal technologies. However, there are many consumers that are skeptical and that feel like they're being listened to or surveilled by bringing smart technologies into their home. So how, as an industry, as we're developing new technologies and capabilities in this space, do we communicate with consumers and ensure that they feel that their data is only being used in ways that make their experiences better? This is a really important component to building consumer trust and reinvigorating a lean in the space of smart homes in the future. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Dieter and Andrew, who are going to show us some fun gadgets that have emerged on the CES floor this year.
So I think we covered all the trends that we wanted to hit on. But of course, there's always the weird, the fun stuff that you see roaming around the floor in Vegas. What are some of those highlights for you? Can you run through that list?
Okay, so CES is a TV show. I got to talk about one TV thing.
Okay.
It's Quantum Dot OLED. It's going to allow for brighter screens with more accurate color. There is a camera that you can put on top of your TV to adjust the sound because it sees where you're sitting, but it will also scold you if you sit too close to the television, which is amazing. L'Oreal has this gadget. It's a hair color thing, but you put a cartridge in it, and then it's got special brushes, and it puts the dye out at a certain rate, so it's much easier to dye your hair at home, and it requires less fiddling with foil or whatever. That seems really promising. But then, my favorite thing, and this sounds silly, but it's a robot that follows you around.
Okay.
But it's just like a box and a shelf, and that seems silly, but if you have mobility issues, carrying stuff is actually a problem. So having a little robot that can follow you around, that can just carry your stuff, actually seems like genuinely useful.
I love that from an accessibility perspective. But Dieter, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I feel like we've learned a lot from this year's show. I think 2022 is going to be a massive year for all these trends. So I just want to thank you so much, and hopefully you do this again next year.
Yeah, this has been fun, and I hope it's been helpful too.
And I just want to thank GroupM for partnering with this video, and have a great CES, everybody.